fourth price, and that becomes the average. That's what we expect for our tenders. So we already believe that we understand what the market value is for diamonds. But the reason why I put this one in is really to explain what is the difference when we have a large stone. And I'm talking specifically about, there's a slide later, the 2 exceptional stone tenders which we had last year. Hands up for those of you who were disappointed by the results of the 2nd exceptional stone tender. And it should be all of you. And that's why this slide is up there, because I don't think people understand how the valuation process works. When we put the 342 carat stone up for sale, it was the high value stone, $20.5 million. It was beautiful. You could have produced a very large stone, and I think what the people that bought it, they saw 2 D-flawless 75 carat stones. So that's a nice yield. Compare that to the 336 carat stone, so only 6 carats difference, which we sold in the 2nd tender. It was rubbish. There were cracks, there were glitzers, there were PKs in it, so you would never get a large stone out of it. But you cannot see that from the picture. Our reserve price, however, was sort of spot on in terms of the value which we got. But that's not information which we can actually give out to the market. So it's very difficult for an analyst or anybody who's actually invested in Lucara to understand what we're potentially going to get for an exceptional stone tender. But what every single analyst missed was if you took the average of the first exceptional stone tender and the second, it was still higher than what we'd achieved for any previous year in terms of average dollar per carat. But everybody was focused on the number. And yet, Lucara still generated almost $100 million from exceptional stone tenders in 2015. But people seem to have very, very short memories. But we're also at Mother Nature's mercy. We don't know when she's going to actually throw out a gem quality stone. This year, so there's now, what is the date today? 10th, 11th, 12th. 12 days into the year, and we have already recovered 400 carat stones. And I can tell you this because it's not material, because all of them are rubbish. One of them might be worth, if you're lucky, 20,000 carats. Mother Nature is not being kind. She was kind of kind to us at the end of last year, and maybe she's just sort of saying, oh, you've gotten everything you need for now. But even regardless of where we mine, we're still recovering the large stones, which is what the size distribution shows. It's what those 4 stones actually indicate. But there's no way we can control the quality of the diamonds. So during 2015, we were very lucky. We had the high quality stones in the first half of the year. But on average, we still received or sold the value which was higher than any previous year. But everybody seems to have forgotten that. And everybody ran out and sold, and because all the press was sort of complaining about Lucara. But look at things on an annual scale. Diamonds are very, very difficult to predict, especially because of the quality distribution we have here. One stone at $20 million actually makes a huge difference to the average. But if we look at an annual basis, and when we put out our guidance of $220 million, it's based on what we know the mine is going to be producing. Not in January, not in February, but over the year, because we know how that volatility actually plans out in terms of the value of those stones. So this is the reason. So what we do is, if you have when people come in to view the stones, they actually bring a whole wheelie bag full of fun equipment. My favorite is obviously the Sarin scanner. They have digital microscopes. But when you put a diamond into the scanner, it does a full, it's got a little rotating turntable. It does a full 3D scan. And this outline here is generally what you'll get. If the further technology is, they'll map all these little green inclusions in you. So if I showed you that stone, and let's assume that one is 300 carats. Actually a bit big. Make it smaller. 150 carats. The picture that you see, you go, wow, this is a great stone, it's all white. But you're not going to be able to see all of those little green things. And that's the challenge with the exceptional stone tenders. Are great brochures, it's great marketing. Don't try and value the stones based on the pictures, because we have a very good photographer. That's the challenge. So we get people that are going, well, the stone looks pretty good. The 336 carat stone looks pretty good in the picture. But I'd actually seen the stone, and I knew we weren't going to get $20 million for it. But it's not information which we're actually able to put out there. Hence, look at it on a sort of a broader scale. So what they'll do is, if they do win the stone, they then go in and they'll actually use a 1,000 times magnification microscope to map out every single little inclusion, little glitz, little hole, etc. in the stone. That's where all this green comes from. So you can actually see how much they're going to lose. About half of that stone is going to dust. So when you see a 300 carat stone, especially the one that we had, the 342, beautiful. You get sort of significant yield from it, lots of little stones. Whereas something like that, you're going to get one large stone, and there's a good potential that that stone is going to have an inclusion in it. There will sort of be an I or an SI group. But what they can do is, when I spoke about the Indians actually maximizing the value of the rough, going that step further in trying to get as much out of the diamond. If you took that, you can see they're going to lose a lot of the stone. What they will now do is they will actually laser cut and manage every single little piece that they can get out of it. They will most probably, in that piece over there or down here, they will get another little stone. So where they produce 30 to 40% of the stone, they can now get 50 to 60% yield from the stone. And that's what's adding to that glut of goods in the smaller size fashion, because you get a pretty small stone out of there. But you can see how they actually now use updated technology to go from maybe one stone to a whole bunch of different stones. And then this is really, I just thought I'd add this in, that one's not it. But you can see they've actually marked it on there, that's that line over there, so they'll cap it. Normally that would have most probably gone to waste. That now becomes another stone. So this little piece here, they'll polish something small out of that, and that actually, this was a 37 carat stone, and they polished around about a 12 carat stone out of it. But it's a good example of the stages which you'll go through. So if you look at from there to there, it's a huge loss. That's all dust. There's no way you can actually recover that. And it most probably would have taken a good 3 or 4 months to polish that away, because it's actually just on a grinding wheel. So there's a lot of effort that goes into it. That stone, I would estimate $1.5 million for that 12 carat stone, around about $100,000, $125,000 a carat from that. And then obviously the little piece that comes out of there, that doesn't get included in the value, but that now contributes to what would have normally gone to waste, but is now in that polished inventory on the smaller stones. So that's pretty much what I've got in the diamond market. I'm going to ask for questions now before I jump into Lucara. So when we have a low value exceptional stone tender, all of you are going to hold your stock. There's not, so that's good. Okay, so Karowe, this is really what you guys came, but I'm hoping that the talk around the diamond industry paints a little bit better picture for where Lucara actually fits in and where we feel protected by when De Beers actually puts out a big number and says diamond prices are down by 15%. We have an insurance specifically because of some pictures later. So the reason why I have this slide in is that is the reason. So a lot of people will come up and they'll say, congratulations on the large stone. What they should actually be saying is, congratulations to management on selecting equipment which would recover that large stone. Because there's not another mine on the planet that would have recovered that stone. So when management in May 2014, sorry, Glenn Condo, our CFO, just look at him and he either nods or shakes his head. So in 2014, management sat around the table, we kicked out the EPCM contractor, and at that point, we made the decision to put in technology that nobody had ever used in the diamond market before. Yes, we tested it, yes, we knew what the risks were, and I think we've been able to manage those risks fairly well. The risk now is, how do you sell 1,000 carat stone? So I think we've actually had a lot of success from it, but it's management's ability to understand the resource and put the technology in which maximizes the value of it, which I think people should be saying congratulations on. But otherwise, it's a nice large stone. So just looking at the fundamentals, 100% owned Karowe mine. I think when we say the consistent delivery of large stones, I think there are still people within other companies who believe that our large stones are going to stop. And I'll get to the slide which shows the consistent recovery. And oddly enough, the two stones, the large stones which were recovered, are from the deepest, hardest material which we have from the South Lobe. So when people say it's only the weathered material, I beg to differ. Because as we've gotten deeper in, and I'll give some numbers a little bit later, we've actually seen an increase in the recovery of those large stones, specifically in the South Lobe. So with that, we are going to do a resource update. We'll touch on it now. We have our dividend policy changed at the end of last year. We've now increased it to a progressive dividend. We're going to pay that quarterly. And I think a lot of people have said, well, are you going to increase it? Are you going to pay a special dividend? The answer is no. We will not pay a special dividend because when we actually paid it, we saw people actually having a very negative impact on our share price. We saw people just buying in. There were 3-4 million shares being traded a day leading up to the record date, and the day after the record date they sold. And we saw a 15 to 20% drop. And we don't want that type of volatility. It doesn't help. Hence us going for the quarterly dividends. But also I think with the revenues we expect through this year with the sale of some of the stones, we'll also look to increase that fairly soon in 2017 and 2018. The sustainable growth, I'll talk about the prospecting licenses and how that's going. And then, of course, our balance sheet. I think it can sort of, I'm looking at Glenn, our finance person, it is going to get stronger. We know that that's what's going to happen through the year. But it's how do we actually best use that to add value to the shareholders in the future. So very briefly, 2016 guidance, it's pretty much the same as 2015 in terms of the 220 million. So when we talk about the exceptional stone tenders, we now, yes, we're sort of going to have 2 this year. But what we want people to say is, forget about the exceptional stone tender. For the 350, 380,000 carats we're going to be producing, in that, based on what we've done 2013, 2014, 2015, we have enough confidence to say, yes, we are going to make money from exceptional stone tenders. It's included in that. And this is what was also sort of quite upsetting. When you looked at the money which we'd already made to the end of Q3, before we had the exceptional stone tender, if we said we were going to do between 200 and 220, why was everybody upset? Because that's where we were trending. Anyway, enough said about that. So what we're trying to do is, if we look at the average diamond price which we're getting now, let's make it around about $550 a carat. Multiply that out by the 350, 380, and you're going to get into that range of where we're talking about. It includes the exceptional stone tenders because they are part of production. If we do have a stone which is 500 carats, it's above that. Very similar to the 200 to 220 does not include the sale of any of those 2 special stones. It is a sort of, I think we've got to define exactly how we sell those first. But that'll be over and above what we see as sustainable production going forward. In terms of operating costs, a slight increase there. We do believe we'll sort of come in under that again. One of the things I think Casat have is very, very astute cost control. So regardless of how much money we have in the bank, they still do everything in their power to reduce costs. And we'll see that when the year-end numbers come out, 24th of February. In terms of our overall, so sustaining capital, 11 million, we do have 2 exceptional items in there, 1.5 million each for the mill reline and the office relocation. But where we had 7 to 8 million in sustaining capital last year, that's around about where it is, and we expect it to stay there going forward. The one exciting thing is actually the deep drilling. So 3.7 million. So what we have in terms of the resource, so I'm going to jump forward a couple, it's easier to talk to. So this is our south lobe. And so it's been drilled down to indicated, so we know what is there to 400 meters. But the deepest hole that they've drilled in here goes down to about there, 758 meters. And it's open at depth. So what they've done is, they only have a couple of pierce points over here, so they've just taken it straight down. They've sort of selected 75 or 78 degrees, and they've just gone flat. So what we will be doing is, from here, we're going to have a whole bunch of pierce points, and we're going to extend the indicator from 400 down to 600. Based on the value of the diamonds which you're getting out of here, underground mining is definitely an option. Problem is, we cannot do a study if we don't have an indicated resource. So, first 2 quarters of the year, we'll be doing the drilling. We should have an updated resource statement close to the end of the 3rd quarter, most probably in the 4th quarter. That allows us to then look at resource extension projects. Do we go underground? And by then, we'll also have a lot more information on the value of our diamonds. So, if I'm making anybody ill, I'm going to stop jumping around soon. But that will then lead into sort of another update on what the diamonds are actually worth. We're going to get to a slide just now which shows where we were in 2013. We are significantly above that, specifically for the diamonds in the South Lobe. And as you saw, the South Lobe is what goes down to the centre of the earth. So it's that which we're going to focus on in terms of the overall underground study. And then I'm going to come back to the exploration of these 2, sort of $7 million, and I'll give you a quick rundown on how that's going. Those of you who saw the last presentation, nothing much has changed. It's actually quite difficult coming to do a presentation when our Q4 results are not out yet. Because I have them in my head. I already know what we've done. But those will only be released sort of in February. So the only thing that's changed here, end of the year, it was end of Q3, $123 million in cash. We had very good sales. The last sale of the year, oddly enough, was better than expected. So that number has grown, and then we got the 6 cent share, which was increased in December. For those of you who've been here before, you'll now notice that Matai is no longer there. So the last thing we have to do with Matai, the potential acquirer which we had there was not actually able to raise the money. The license has now gone back to the government. We're just working with them on what our final rehabilitation liability will be. It is money that we've already accrued. It is not material, so we've taken it off. So that's just where we are. And then obviously I've added in the licenses, which we're working on, started in November through most of this year. That's the mine site. Nothing important. Okay, the most important thing is we have a lot of water. When I was on site last week, 43 degrees Celsius. I'm here now, so my tan is fading as I stand here because it's so cold outside. But especially in Gaborone, so the capital of Botswana, the main water dam is dry. There's a little patch of water. They have no water. They've had no rain. So when you look at things and you see there's water there, there's water there, these are full. And that's our 100-year overflow dam. It's about 60% full from rains which they had a year ago. So one of the things which we're very comfortable with, everybody always asks you about water and power. Water you see, and if you look at our overall utilization, power is very stable in Botswana. They've actually brought the Irish power company in to run the turbines which they have there, and it took a while to get them going. But we now have seen sort of a lot of sustainable power. Obviously power dips with the lightning, which we see a lot of thunderstorms over here. But sort of site and everything, specifically those two risks are being managed very well. I've already touched on that. And I'm going to continue to put this slide in, and it's specifically for those people that think, oh, the large stones are going to stop. And the important ones, which we've blurred them so you can't quite see them, is the 11. It's not 4 ones anymore. It's actually 1,109. If you go and you look very, very carefully on the diamonds, or the pictures we put out, and I've got one later, of the 1100 carat stone, it wasn't properly cleaned, but we needed it. It was material. I can't hold on to it in 1100 carat stone, and the market sort of is waiting for the information. The problem is that if this is the cleaning container, it just fits inside. So you don't get the circulation of the cleaning fluid. So you'll dissolve a piece of kimberlite or calcrete, and then it'll automatically go back into the cracks. So we actually had the gurus from Antwerp come down, and the stone has now been through 7 cycles of cleaning. And it's just because it's so large. And I'll point out something as well, which is important. So we now have a much cleaner stone. So the pictures which everybody here has seen, it looks better than that. So we should, I'll touch on the naming of the stone shortly. So that's the 1100, there's the 800 over there. This material is just very difficult to process, it's very high yield. So we actually have about 20 stockpiles on site. If we jump back, around here, these are all, no, those are waste. All of these here are run-of-mine stockpiles. So they will have a big label that says this is what the yield is, this is what the grade is. And we are looking at a program, we're still doing test work, which enable us to process any of this material and accelerate the carat production at the end of the year. But that's still sort of in the wings. So, as you see, deepest part, that's where the large stones come from. And this is our hard, competent material. So we're recovering them from there, again, on the contact. We do believe that they will continue. So this is the slide I was talking about. When we did the resource update in 2030, we were looking at $413 a carat for the south. That number now is much higher. I'm not going to tell you how much higher, and that doesn't include the sale of those 2 big stones. But that one is most probably 30% higher because of both the size distribution, but the improvement in quality of what we've seen being produced from the South Lobe. So when we do the resource update, we'll obviously update all of these numbers. And again, a lot of people say, well, how much South Lobe? And I'd say for the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be most probably somewhere between 65 and 75% South Lobe being processed per year, and then it starts to accelerate after that. As we get sort of below that, I guess where the centre lobe starts to trail off. We've only got this one in. It's interesting though, those 5 stones which we sold for more than $1 million, or $5 million, if I put a value curve in there, that little blue one is actually bigger than what we had in 2014. And that's specifically, again, because of the increasing quality of the diamonds, the white, clean stones which we're producing from the South Lobe. So maybe not as many stones, but much, much higher value stones. Oddly enough, this is also a symptom of the new technology which management has installed, where previously that stone would have gone to the crusher and ended up in 2 or 3 smaller stones. We're now recovering larger stones which are more valuable, hence that number being lower than what we see there. I'm not going to say anything more about the exceptional stone tenders. I think I've talked about them now. And of course. So if you look carefully in there, There was still calcrete, which we were busy sort of trying to clean out when the photographs were taken.